Hey folks, welcome back to a brand new video and something very different from the usual from me today. We're at Silverstone, real life motorsport this time, for a very special event, courtesy of my family as a birthday gift. We're here for a Formula single-seater driving experience, which is extremely exciting. I've never been to Silverstone, and it was a first real taste of what it's like at the home British motorsport, as we were treated some Caterham racing around part of the circuit. There's two race meetings going on the main Grand Prix, so we got treated to some wheel-to-wheel action as we were looking down alongside the pit lane, Silverstone wing, and over the new bridge and hotel. And yeah, it's really nice to sort of decompress and get my head in the game, ready for the main run later on. As you can see, this is Stowe Circuit. Coming down at the end of the back straight, heading into the S's. This is a group earlier than me, heading out for just getting their acclimatised and doing their pace laps behind these BMW pace cars. And as you can see, the track was a little bit damp. It was a bit of a downpour earlier on. So I was hoping, with about an hour or so left until my run, that it would dry out a little bit more, and fortunately it did. So having gone through the sign-ups at the wing and got settled in and went through the briefing, we were transported back to Stowe pit lane, ready to get kitted up with the helmet. That's about all we needed, and waited to go and get in the cars. So as you can see, this is the assistant helping me get the seat adjusted so that I was comfortable in the car, because frankly you need to figure this out now, because these cars are not very spacious at all. And you know, you need to be at a good distance from the pedals so that you're not stretching, because with the forces that come with cars like this when you're pushing them, you want to make sure you can get full travel without every pedal. So once I found that, they helped me get seat belts on, securely fastened in the car, and then just running through some of the controls as well. As you can see, that's the sort of media centre and where you get kitted up with the helmet down at the Stowe complex. And yeah, it was just a few of the basics, running through the ignition, the start button, making sure I understood how exactly I needed to start this thing, because it's not like turning the key in a road car and off it goes. There's a little bit more to it, but it's just making me aware of the fact that the wing is invisible. Once you're in the cockpit, you can't see it, so watch what you're doing. Watch the width of the tyres. The front is narrower than the rear, so make sure you're careful when going for overtakes. Check the angle of your wing mirrors, because you need to be able to see the cars behind you in case you need to let someone through, which, given my inexperience, was a strong possibility. So we take a closer look at the cockpit now, just running through this H-pattern shifter, which I was familiar with from a run that I did at Thruxton a while back in a single-seater. So it had all three pedals, a clutch, brake and accelerator, and a H-pattern 4-speed gearbox. So I needed to make sure I was sort of understanding that a little bit, what the pattern was, and you know, just getting familiar, because you don't want to be going out there, you know, overly nervous. As Chris Hadfield once said, the more you know, the less you fear. So I was just trying to get an understanding as much as I could. So this is heading out onto the pace laps, which I showed earlier from the Silverstone wing. But this is my go in that. I'm in number 9, the red car, third in this group, and it seemed to be quite a high-paced group actually. By the end of this session, we were catching the slower groups prior to our run. So what it did do was put us at the back of the queue for the 20-minute run. So as I say, there's 10 minutes to get acclimatised. They had 20 minutes of a free run for us to just go out there and do the best we could, really, and see what we could do with this car. So this is just getting ready now. I did have a stall on the pacing run, but this time got it pulled away quite nicely. You need about 4,000 revs before you lift the clutch, otherwise the car will just stutter or completely stall. But quite happy with that little pull away there, and as they begin to let the cars out, we'll begin our run out onto the Stowe Circuit, where many of the greats have driven round. I must be honest, I mean, it's not the Grand Prix loop obviously, but it's still an iconic piece of tarmac, it must be said. So we head out onto the track now, and courtesy of my family, we get a great shot heading out from the my my free run for 20 minutes. So, as we head out onto the pit straight, getting up to some speed already, but just building that confidence as quickly as we can, having done a bit of acclimatisation runs in the sim on Project Cars 2. You know, proper tryhard mode, frankly. Coming through this first chicane, again, just getting used to how much grip this car can give. And the one thing I will note is that when you're watching back from a camera, it's always going to look slower than when you were sat in the car doing this for real. That's one thing I can't stress enough, is the sensation you get when you're doing this in reality. So coming down this back straight, in Project Cars there's chicanes on this straight, but here there really wasn't. There was a chicane here ready into the sort of left-hander, which tightened up that whole section. And then we go into the S section, and you know, the G-forces, once I got up to enough speed later on, were quite something, it must be said. So essentially we go out and we're just doing the best we can, but the problem is, of course, if you're quick enough, you're always going to encounter traffic ahead of you. So we did have cars ahead of us who were basically, they were going fast enough to stay ahead, because there was a system of blue flags that the marshals were using to keep things under control and make sure that overtakes were only with permission, for safety reasons. We don't want people going for moves in obscure places and then collisions happening, because these cars are not cheap, and they do have a lot of groups to get through every day, frankly. Every day they're open. So we're catching the back of this group which we were with earlier, and there's a slower orange car ahead, so I was like, I need to get my foot down and close up, otherwise I'm going to get stuck behind this car for another rest of the lap, another straight. So, as I say, down this back straight and the pit straight were the only overtaking zones on the lap. They wouldn't let you overtake anywhere else, because, as I say, there's a real risk that you could have a collision, because someone's maybe not checking their mirrors properly, and you go down the inside, they turn across you and get wiped out. And that's the end of your run. And the end of possibly other people's runs later on, as they discover that there's no more cars, or there's no cars for them to drive. Which, you know, no one wants that. So we're all sort of trying to do our best to behave ourselves and mind the flags, and yeah, just try and keep pushing the car as much as we could. We've got the marshal post just there, and on the gantry on the platform just off to the right there was the spectator area. Coming down the old Stowe pit lane, and with an Aston Martin building on the right, basically the paddock area for Stowe, and what looks like one of the old air traffic control towers as well, so I assume that's been converted basically, because this was an airfield. But coming through this hairpin back onto the back straight, it was just about just getting a feel for how much acceleration this car has, and the other thing was how bumpy the circuit is. As you can see, it's, you know, driving over these areas of re-tarmacked road, you know, track surface is extremely bumpy. And especially coming through this next left-hander as well, there's a lot of very heavy bumps, and as you get your foot down and get a little bit clear space, the faster you go, the bumpier it gets, and the car really doesn't like it. But I get the feeling that I needed to get up to a bit more speed to really understand how bumpy this can be. But honestly, it was enough. There's a lot going on with these. You've got to concentrate on getting your gear shifts right. You've got to concentrate on getting your turning points right, getting on the power at the right point, braking sufficiently for the next corner, watching for cars around you, watching the car ahead of you to stay near them, watching the flags from the marshals. It's a lot to take in. It's an awful lot to take in. And with the physicality of the car, the G-forces, the bumps, it's something else, and that's why I was very glad the weather stayed dry, given that on arrival at Stowe, when we parked up and we saw a group about to head out, and it absolutely chucked it down, hence why it was still damp when I was getting footage of the track earlier on for another group's pace laps. So no, I was very wary about that, and I'm very grateful and very appreciative that the heavens did not open once again for this run. In fact, it was basically immaculate conditions with that amazing backdrop of the Silverstone wing. So, yeah, trying to stay as close as we can to this group, being a bit more brave, using the curbs here just to get a sensation of what it's like to use the racing line in single-seaters at a track as narrow as this, because Thruxton, by comparison, was very open, very fast. Spent a lot of time at the limiter, whereas here it's all about acceleration and braking and cornering. There's a lot more to it. As this car ahead of us, group of 3, got blue flagged, which gave myself and the car ahead a bit more free space. So it invited us to really push the car a little bit more. So yeah, sweeping through this chicane again, trying to just build a little bit more speed with each lap, because we're not really there in terms of the confidence quite yet. Obviously, it's still early days, there's a lot going on, it's trying to keep tabs on things. And we were aware that that blue car that was ahead of us did get blue flagged, but if we were going too slow, we could have got blue flagged back. So we had to keep the pace up enough to deter the marshals from, you know, telling us to get behind, because they could easily do that if you're too slow. As we see with this car ahead of us now, caught another one. It meant we did have to sort of slow off a bit and leave a bit of room. At least that was my preference, although looking back I think I probably could have closed up a little bit here. But, you know, just beginning to build that confidence, and I think this car ahead did eventually get blue flagged, I'm not entirely sure. But they were going quite slow. In fact, on this lap they didn't. But we were still going to push. We assumed that they were going to sort of get a move on as well. But obviously the problem is with this camera, as I say, is the reason I'm doing a lot of voiceover, is a lot of it is wind noise because of where the camera is located. It's on the right hand side above the cockpit, so we needed to, you know, have a view in front of us and behind us to capture my head movements and, you know, just capture that view behind me, because this was a 360 camera video, but obviously I've captured the front and rear view. So yeah, pushing on down this back straight once again, gathering a bit more speed this time, definitely hitting the limiter. But as you can hear, that wind noise just overpowers everything, because we're nowhere near the exhaust, we're nowhere near the back of the car, because we wouldn't be able to see us. So yeah, it's a shame we can't separate the mic and put that near the exhaust, because you get a lot more appreciation for how this car sounds, which is just fantastic, I have to say. But you know, that's the limitation when you want a view of yourself driving the car versus a good sound. So yeah, some more off-board shots, which is excellent. That car did eventually get blue flagged, which I think gave us the opportunity to go through. Although having said that, they were carrying a bit more speed on the right. The car ahead of us went through, but I think that's where they decided to pull back in. I was too far behind, so I had to wait a little bit longer. So that car ahead was able to have some clear track and push on and try and improve their lap times. Obviously, with the amount of traffic that we were experiencing, we were never going to have consistent lap times, but we're always trying to look for that bit of clear space to get our best lap time in. So again, the sun glare, I tell you what, they've always said that in you know, when you're learning to drive, about the hazard perception, and one of them being low sun. Honestly, huge hazard here, because it's the glare off your helmet and off the top of the car with the sun in your face is, yeah, it's very annoying, because you want to concentrate on the next corner and that's just in your face. But you know, after a few laps, I'd like to think there was just getting used to that a little bit and just focusing more on the car ahead and the next apex and so on. So we caught a lot more cars up ahead. They were all getting let through as we push on through. I think that was the south corner, heading on to the pit straight again. We managed to sneak through on this orange car again. They were going very, very slowly. They were lacking in confidence through this entire session, because we ended up overtaking them a few times in the end. But yeah, as I say, gathering a little bit more speed all the time. You know, getting a feel for how the car is behaving, how much braking you can use, when you can get on the power, when it's best to change gear, because they did tell us don't go above 5,500 revs for gear changes, because you're over revving the car, which, to be honest, once you're out there and getting to drive it, they're right, it's not suited to very, very high revs. So you want to just get in that rev range just below 5,500, and then get that gear change as sweetly as you can to maximise your speed, because once you're in fourth, it hits the limiter pretty quickly and you're not going to gather much more speed than that. and we were always aware of the hazards around us, such as cars ahead, and even cars behind, say if they outbroke themselves. So we always had to be aware of that. Quite a short lap, obviously, so we didn't spend a lot of time, you know, until we saw, you know, the pit straight again. So there's always that sense of I need to stay closer to these cars so that I can capitalise on a move if the marshal opts to put his blue flag out. There's that's what I mean, there's a lot going on, and those corners come up on you fast. Even though it doesn't look like it on the camera, I promise you when you're there and you're in it, it's something, it's another sensation entirely. So getting a lot busier ahead of us at this point, so we had to be very aware of that, and we've got cars sort of backing off to let faster ones through. We were still stuck in this train a bit. We had a car behind us, I believe, that was waiting to come through. But, you know, we were going fast enough, and the marshals are pointing out slower cars ahead of us, so we were all sort of in place until we could get a move through, basically. So, obviously, as I say, this session was 20 minutes in length, and the intention was to capture 360 video footage of the entire 20 minutes. Unfortunately, even before heading out, there seemed to be some technical issues with the camera. And while they did reset it and the camera started running, apparently there was some issues with it, because soon the camera does shut off. So we don't capture the whole session. But as you can see, we did manage to get through on this car. The marshal did decide that they weren't going fast enough, so we pushed through, and this was the most speed that I captured, that I carried through the chicane on this captured footage at least. We did keep gathering speed, but it was about just getting confidence the whole time, and that's the biggest thing. It's getting over that mindset that you can push these cars faster than you think because of the downforce they produce. It's not something you can, you know, get an appreciation for fully in the sim, as we went past that orange car yet again. So I don't know if this car ahead was expecting us to come through as well, but either way we weren't close enough, and we did opt to sort of hang back because they were quite quick. And for the most part we followed this car for the rest of the session, but as we come up to these S's, unfortunately the footage does cut out. So as we come back into the paddock now, the instructor's helping us and get the seat belts off and take the camera off so they can process the footage. And I struggled to get out of the car with my weary arms and legs, my unfit physique, struggling to get around for 20 minutes in these cars, but I can't stress enough how physical these are to drive. So we'll leave you with the outro from me, basically, my reaction immediately out of the car. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and see you for the next one.
You're right. How was it?
Best experience of my entire life.
I think you overtook about 5, didn't you?
Honestly, on it. There's so much grit.
Bloody brilliant.
They're amazing. They are absolutely amazing.
No, I'm really pleased. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I hope I topped 100 mile an hour. Straight over Formula cars.